Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be doing a coaching call with Chris, one of the subscribers of the channel. Say hi, Chris.
What's up, guys?
So, essentially, we are just going to be going through some of Chris's games. We played a game the other day that we're going to be analyzing. And what I'm going to be focusing on mostly is the mindset behind Chris's moves and where it might be good, where it might be bad, and really trying to delve into the reasoning behind the moves that he's playing and think and try and explore the logic of what he's doing, which I think will be really valuable for lots of you watching. So just before we started recording, Chris was telling me about how he can get thrown off by weird moves in the opening quite often. So we got this position here, the Caro Kann, of course, and he was saying that weird moves tend to throw him off. In this game, I played pawn to e5, but I was asking him, well, okay, a move like queen f3, that's a strange move, and at lower elos, you're going to face these kinds of moves quite often. So I was asking him what he would do here, and can you repeat, please?
Yeah, so I thought, well, if I move knight f6, then you're going to push the pawn down to e5 and threaten the knight. Then I'm going to have to move the knight. That's a wasted move. Um, and then if I were to push f6, then I've got to worry about the queen coming to h5 and threatening the king. I can push g6,
In this
and
position, it's
then
not so bad, but
well, here's my thought: is I haven't moved the dark square bishop or the knight.
mhm.
And now I have, if I castle, I'm in trouble because my structure is like all wacky.
It is a bit compromised, definitely. I think in this position though, after the move pawn to f6, white doesn't necessarily have to play queen to h5. Obviously, that is the first move that you should look at, absolutely. Queen h5, g6 is basically forced. The queen, I don't know, retreats back to f3. And then it's not all bad, but you've definitely got a weird looking structure. And even if the computer tells you it's fine, this is not a familiar Caro Kann position to be playing, obviously. Um, I assume plans like e5 are going to happen in the future, but still, it looks very tender around the king. So you rejected knight to f6 on the basis of e5, which is fair.
Yes,
Which is fair. Normally, the knight, if it can be hit like this, you can try and venture into e4, but even something like knight d2 takes, clearly white is up in development, right?
correct.
So are there any other moves in this position that you might consider other than pawn f6 or knight f6?
Yeah, so I mean, if you just wanted to give a check for the heck of it, I don't know what end you would do it for. I know that obviously there's queen a5. You could do
Yeah.
that. Um, you could push. I don't know how relevant it would be to this opening necessarily. I'm not extremely familiar, but you maybe could go c5, threaten the center, and then if white takes, you can put your knight on c6.
Yeah,
Then
I can see the logic behind that. Normally in these Caro Kann structures, you want to wait to play c5 until white's committed the pawn to e5. So kind of like what happened in our game. Once we have this kind of structure where the d pawn isn't under threat of being captured, then c5 makes a bit more sense to undermine the d pawn, which is defending the e pawn, right? But
okay,
what I would ask you, so you said other than the moves you just mentioned, you saw queen to a5 check, and I suppose the most forcing moves in the position are checks, captures, and attacks, right?
correct,
So
yeah,
we can conclude that queen a5 doesn't really do a whole lot, right? It's a little bit of a pointless check, which you said. But what about just taking?
it it would bother me, I guess, because I would think now the queen's got central control, and so does the pawn, and I'm like, I'm not doing well at all at this point.
Well, okay, but
Now that's
why?
thinking.
Yeah, no,
I
I know, I
don't know.
know, I know, mate. Don't worry, don't worry. Um, I mean, the most obvious move in the position is knight f6 in my eyes, just attacking the queen, right?
Okay.
And then you could argue that yes, by taking, you're losing some central control that this d pawn does offer. Alternatively, you are trading the central pawns. So white loses his strong e pawn, you lose your strong d pawn, and then you get to develop with tempo. The queen also has to watch the d4 pawn, right?
Okay.
So let's say, I don't know, queen d3, just keeping an eye on the pawn. I mean, I feel like you can develop relatively normally here. Like, you could fianchetto, you could even just play knight bd7, even queen b6 is reasonable. But this kind of position, I suppose, m- correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps your mindset is, well, white clearly does have better central control than we do. Like, he's got a pawn on d4, we have 0 central pawns on these 4 squares, right? And therefore I have less control of the center and can only be worse. Is that?
Yeah. So basically, yeah. You know how you have like the rules of your basic elementary rules, like you want to castle within the first like 5 to 10 moves. You want to develop your pieces before your pawns if you can.
Yeah.
Knights before bishop. Things like that.
Yeah.
I I what I do is when I'm playing, those rules tend to be like not as flexible for me. I guess I try to follow the rules, and then I think maybe that's what gets me in trouble is I'm not playing pliably.
Yeah,
So
I get you.
I morph to the situation. I just follow the rules, and I think maybe that's what's get me in trouble.
Yeah, I suppose with the Caro Kann, it is a little bit of a different opening in the sense that it doesn't necessarily follow all of the like principled ideas. So if you maybe want something easier, e5 might be an easier opening to play because you can put your knights on c6, f6, get the bishop out, castle, it's nice and easy, right? So
Right.
if you're trying simply to learn and kind of cement the basics, and then once you've learned more of the fundamentals, then start to be a bit more flexible, you can definitely do it like that and play these e5 openings instead. Alternatively, if you do want to play the Caro Kann, things are a little bit different because a lot of the time this light squared bishop will get developed before the knight. I mean, what happened in our game, of course, e5 and you go bishop to f5. What's the reasoning behind bishop f5? Because normal chess rules they're knights before bishops, right? So
Right.
why is bishop f5 an exception here?
Uh, because when I read the book by Lars, what's his name? A Caro Kann repertoire. I can't remember his name right now, but that was the move he said was the best move on this, so that's what
Hmm.
I did. Now I understand that it's defending the e4 square, um,
Yeah.
and then I know the idea is to get your light squared bishop out of the pyramid that you're going to make. So
Hmm.
e6 on the next, hopefully,
Yeah.
and you can play.
Something like this.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And see, so in this situation, it's a good example of where opening principles, you have to be a bit malleable on them because in this particular scenario, you're giving white dark squares in the center for the time being and setting up this like light squared complex with your pawns, right? And you hope eventually to go after the dark squares with a move like c5, and of course you're getting the bishop out of the center, sorry, out of the back rank to, one, just fight for the light squares, and two, you want to play the move e6, but you want to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain first, right?
yes,
So like there's many ways to play the Caro Kann, but this is one of the more simple ways to do it. So let's say I don't know, knight f3, e6, c3, and then you can immediately start fighting for the dark squares with the move c5, right?
Okay.
Because you've got your light square bishop out, then you can close the pawn chain, and your light squares are incredibly secure as a result of that. If your bishop was back on its home square, so let's say instead of bishop f5, you were to go e6 and prepare c5 here, yeah, what why is this not such a good idea compared to bishop f5, e6, then c5?
Well, I mean, because basically your light square bishop is dead at this point. You can't get him out. He's he's um he's not able to be utilized. I mean, you could move. I guess you could get him out by moving the b pawn, but
Yeah, something like this
that
maybe.
yeah. But see, the problem is that guy, the other guy, has got a very nice diagonal already.
Mm.
That he's so
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, in our game, I went g4 here, which why do you think I went g4?
to threaten the bishop, and then I should have, when I reviewed this, if I'm not mistaken, I should have moved back to g6.
Yeah, so you played bishop g6, which is correct. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you played bishop g6, which is correct. The computer does like throwing in this first and then going back to g6. Of course, bishop e4 threatens the rook, right?
Okay.
And if I play pawn to f3, attacking the bishop and closing off the diagonal, you have to go back. Why might this be slightly preferable for black to force white to throw in the move f3?
Because now you've taken away the sense of castling for him on the king side. That would be my guess.
Well,
Also,
you
you're
could
controlling.
argue that g4 already does that, and I'm kind of showing my intention to not want to castle kingside, because even with the position that we got here, castling kingside is still very risky, right?
Yes.
So whenever a piece moves, it stops doing something, right?
Hmm.
It stops doing something. Now, of course, the pawn is controlling g3 and e3, which, let's be honest, aren't particularly important squares, right?
Okay.
Because they're already accounted for. But after, let's say, white plays a nothing move like a3, you can see the computer evaluation swings into black's favor massively. Can you figure out why that might be, and why including the move f3, or forcing white to include the move f3 with bishop to e4, is a good idea?
Mm,
Again, think about what the pawn no longer does.
are we talking about what the a3 what the a pawn no
No,
longer
no,
does?
no. Disregard the a pawn. I was just playing a random move to illustrate the point.
Yeah.
So in this position, you play bishop g6, right? Which is a
Yeah.
perfectly reasonable move. The engine slightly prefers throwing in bishop e4, hitting the rook, forcing the move f3, and then after bishop g6, if white has no sense of danger, then there is a pretty decent response for the well.
Oh,
Black can make a nice threat here basically and exploit this f3 move.
I would, now that I'm looking at it, would it be because you could push e6 and then you got the queen controlling you've got the queen controlling those two diagonals, but you've also got queen h4.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the whole point. Is that by having white play f3, this pawn no longer looks after this diagonal. So if again white plays a nothing move, then queen h4, you're not winning, but like it's good. It's good.
Yeah, because you're forcing the king to move, and then I mean, you've got him now. I mean, it's just a matter of follow up.
Yeah, I mean, there's no immediate checkmate or anything, but I would say the main issue for white is how are you actually getting these kingside pieces out now? Because
Yeah,
what forcing the move f3 also does is makes it more difficult for this knight to develop, right?
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So again, this is I'm not teaching you theory here or anything, although maybe you will face this in a game, I don't know. But I'm more so trying to make you aware of when a piece does something, what does it no longer do? What squares might it leave behind that you can exploit, right?
Okay.
Got that?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool, cool. All right, so here I played the move f4, which is considered an inaccuracy. Um, Again, why, based off of what we just said, why might f4 be inaccurate?
Let's see. I, other than what we just talked about, I don't know.
Well, based on what we just said.
So based on what we just said, again, it's e6, and then now you've got a nice control over the f5 square, so your bishop's not completely out in the open and wrecked,
Yep,
uh, possibly. And
yep.
then now you've got control over the diagonals that the queen had before with the other move.
Mm-hmm. And again, if white plays a lazy move,
Um, you'd have to move. I mean, at that point, it would probably be beneficial to move, like you said, queen h4, make the king move out, and now he's in tactics land now.
he's in a lot of trouble. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and therefore I played the move knight to f3, which why am I playing knight f3?
Mm, goodness. Well, you're making sure that let me look. I would assume it's because you don't want to have the D and E pawns under defended, and then you're beefing up your center, and
Mm,
also you want to keep me from playing either the queen to h4, which I would assume is the main reason, and then also it keeps me from playing. Oh goodness, f6.
I mean, f6 isn't particularly scary, to be honest,
Okay.
because my e5 pawn, like f6 attacks e5, right?
Mhm.
I mean, my e5 pawn is very well defended, and I suppose knight to f3 does help with that. But realistically, I'm probably going to take with a pawn. Although, to be fair, if you were to take now, knight takes might be better. Although the computer prefers f takes because we keep control over f6, making it hard for you to develop.
Oh
But
yeah.
the main reason for knight to f3 is literally just to develop a piece because yeah, defend the h4 square, which is the immediate threat, and also if a move like c5, which you did play here, then the d pawn is already quite well defended, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Here, the computer gives c5 as a mistake, but that's only because it prefers the move h5, trying to undermine my light squares. I would say that's a relatively advanced concept, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Um, it wants a very strange line like this, which I'm going to be honest. Once I see it, I
I,
can understand.
I would
But
never have seen that.
yeah, no, it's just a computer line, so I wouldn't worry at all. Um, this is where your understanding of engine analysis can be useful in the sense of you don't have to. So, for example, here you played c5 and the engine gives it a question mark. It's not necessarily a bad move. You have to figure out why the engine says it's a bad move, and it's because it wants this strange line, right? From a human
Okay.
perspective, unless it's theory, which this is not, I mean, this is not relevant at all. right? So you can happily say, okay, c5 is a good move, the move that you played, because the alternative, no one's ever seeing, right?
Okay.
So just, again, the engine says it's a mistake. Don't trust the engine straight away. Figure out why. Cool?
Okay.
Okay, so c5. Of course, in the other line we were looking at earlier with where was it? Where was it? Where was it? Here. You remember this line? With just the normal advanced variation, bishop f5, knight f3, e6, something like c3 and c5. You secure your light squares, and then you push c5 to attack the dark squares, right?
Yes.
Here, you essentially did that exact same thing, except a few extra moves were thrown in the mix. So, great job with keeping with the program, essentially. This is absolutely the right sort of idea. Here, I played bishop b5 check. The reason I played bishop b5 check is because my logic is, okay, your bishop can no longer help out with the queenside light squares, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to force your knight to block in some manner. So let's say knight c6, right? And then I essentially just develop a piece with tempo. I'm not too concerned about this knight because it's pinned for the time being, but I can also snap it off at any point, right?
Uh, yeah, and then you've got double pawns. Is that the point behind that?
Maybe. Although in fairness, let's say I were to take here, that wouldn't be a particularly good move because these double pawns are alright because this is about to get traded off regardless. So let's say something like castles takes and knight takes. Then you can just push c5 again.
Oh, okay. I got you.
So double pawns aren't always bad. Um, and particularly in these Caro Kann positions where the bishop's pinning the knight here, normally you don't have to be too concerned about an exchange there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I mean, as I said, this c pawn, the whole point of putting it on c5 was to trade for the d pawn in some manner, whether the d pawn takes you or you take the d pawn, right?
Right.
So you're immediately going to liquidate the double pawn anyway. You're going to take and push, or white's going to take you, and then look, we've got a beautiful little pawn triangle here.
Uh, yeah. Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. The situation might be a little bit different if, for whatever reason, we couldn't trade it. But I mean, even in some weird scenario where c4 gets played, this pawn's still coming to c5, and it will still trade itself off, and we won't have a big structural weakness, right?
Okay.
So, alright then. You went king e7. Is there a reason you didn't block with the knight, or did you just simply miss the fact you could block with the knight?
No, I didn't miss it. I think I might have taken just a little bit more time on this move because I wasn't sure. Um, but I don't remember. It was because I was worried about what we were just talking about, having to double the pawns,
Hmm.
and I didn't know, what that concept was whenever you just showed me. I didn't know
Right.
it at the time.
I think it can be very easy, especially at a lower level, to kind of what am I trying to say? To like exaggerate the importance of a set of double pawns or believe that a set of double pawns is incredibly weak. But like
Okay.
I mean, even if we couldn't trade these pawns off, I mean, how is white actually going to exploit this pawn?
Well, not really at the moment. He's not gonna.
I mean, I would say the main ways to get there would maybe be queen a4, but obviously the c pawn is currently in the way. But even then, I mean, you've got pieces that can defend the pawn, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be overly concerned. But okay, king e7 played. Now you know that you don't need to worry too much about that.
Okay.
But I mean, even if you were worried about it, you could just go knight d7.
Oh well, yeah, I guess it could have. Yeah. Okay.
If for some reason you really don't want the double pawns, or in your specific scenario the double pawns would actually be quite bad, then yeah, you can block like this, and then if take, you can take, and that's all good. So
Okay.
something like this, and black's doing very well because you essentially have the only light squared bishop, and I would argue it's a pretty strong bishop. Just patrolling the light squares, which of course you kind of have a bit of a monopoly over right now, because typically white's light squared bishop would come to d3 in a lot of these lines. Let's say you played a move like 97, like bishop to d3 would be a reasonable move because you want to challenge the light squared bishop for black, right?
Right. And then you would trade these off because there's not a reasonable move other than that.
Yeah, and essentially, if you don't, then it's difficult for white to fight on the light squares in the center, essentially. But okay, that's not that big a deal. c5, good move. Now, of course, you want me to take, right?
That's what I had understood would be the most common move.
Yeah, and a lot of people will take. And why is this good for black?
I don't know actually. I just
Okay.
know that move that I just know that that's the move I read that was the correct move to do. So
Yeah, no, and in many positions it is. The reason that it's so good for black is because let's look at this position, right? Now, black, of course, as you said before, wants to get his minor pieces developed and get castled, right?
okay.
Now, this dark squared bishop, because you've made such an effort to fight on the light squares with your pawns, right? White has taken the dark squares for himself, essentially. And
Oh
it's that, does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you're okay with that because, like I said, you're going to fight with c5 and undermine the dark squares. The reason that you want to do this as well is not just to fight for the dark squares, but also because you want to give this bishop a good development square, essentially. Because currently, you can't come to d6 or c5, right?
Right.
You can't come to a3, obviously. If you come to b4, why is this not a good move?
Um, because you've got C3, and that then you've got a monopoly over the dark squares now.
Yeah, and either you go back to a5 and your bishop stares at nothing, or you go back to e7 where you could have gone in the first place and you've just helped white to improve his position, essentially.
Right, and that's wasting a tempo, right?
Yeah, you're just wasting time. So, yeah, therefore, bishop e7 is kind of the only viable square. But then the question is, well, where is this knight going then? Because in the Caro Kann advanced variation, right, which is what this structure resembles, you again you take the light squares and you're happy to give away the dark squares for the time being. One of the annoying things about this e5 pawn, which if you plan on playing the Caro Kann, you'll encounter very, very often, is that it controls d6 and f6. D6 isn't necessarily a big deal, but F6 is the natural developing square for this knight, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And realistically, knight H6 is a little bit awkward. Yeah?
I I would not have thought to play knight H6. I rarely try to put my knights on the rim.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely correct, because normally it's not a particularly good idea to put the knight on the rim. So, in the Caro Kann, when you get this kind of structure, it's very difficult to develop because the knight and the bishop kind of stumble over each other because they both want to go to e7 basically, but only one of them can, right?
Okay.
So c5, the reason that taking is so good for black, based on what we've just said, can you explain why this is so good?
Um.
Don't worry if you can't.
Um. Okay. Well, so it. I think I've got to cut off. I don't know. I'm looking, but I don't know.
Okay. So what would you play here with black?
I would take the pawn.
Right. And now let's compare this position to this position, right? You see these two positions.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Why is this position significantly worse than this position? What's different?
Well, you've got some dark square control.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you're let's see. I mean, so you've got yeah, you've got dark square control. You've
Mm-hmm.
got what's the other one that I just saw? Can you flop them back and forth
Yeah.
and then go back to the other one? Yeah, so that pawn that was on d4 is now not there. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And what I would say in relation to what we were talking about here, with the fact that these pieces can trip over each other because they both want to go to e7, right? I mean,
Right.
if you were to put the knight on e7 here, I mean, how is his bishop developing, right?
Yes.
So, kind of the whole point of c5 not only is to fight for the dark squares, but white can't justify taking because after bishop takes, one, you have this beautiful diagonal. Two, white loses his important d4 pawn, which is just a great pawn because it's fighting for the dark squares in the center, and now white has given up the c5 square.
I did not
Thirdly,
realize. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no worries. Thirdly, now we get the e7 square for the knight, and this bishop is out of the way, so we can go knight e7 and castles. So we solve the entire problem of kingside development by giving this bishop the valuable c5 square. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I did not realize that d4 pawn was like it's so strong. I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we look at a different line of the advanced variation, let's say one of the lines that I play with black, something like, let me remember. Okay, well, yeah, let's just even have this. Black essentially gambits the pawn on c5, and I've got loads of videos in this. Um, we are willing to literally give up a pawn on move 4 just to get this d pawn away from the d4 square because it supports e5. And now we're basically saying to white, well, your two central pawns, they're not so big and scary now that the d4 pawn isn't supporting e5.
That is interesting. Wow. Okay.
Like, I think this might be a good illustration of how strong the d4 pawn is. That on move 3, we are willing to move our pawn twice and sacrifice a pawn just to get rid of it.
Wow. Okay.
Right? It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So, as I said, taking, not good. Not good. So, I played bishop b5 check, and we have king e7. Now the dynamic of the position changes. If a move like knight c6, which would be more principled, then, I mean, white can play a move like bishop to e3, maybe castle, knight c3, just play normal developing moves. Again, taking would be very, very bad. Bishop c5, and, I mean, black goes knight g to e7, castles, and basically his pieces are perfect. Let's say white plays some bad developing moves. I don't even know. Bishop d2 and castles kingside. This is a pretty ideal setup, right?
Okay.
And because this d4 pawn is gone, the black pieces can kind of use this new open space to go after the white king, or just to play d4 themselves and kind of instigate in the white territory, right?
Okay. All right.
So, of course, this game we have king to e7, which is, I would say, like you said before, with the queen coming to h4 and the king going to d2, and you said that
Hmm.
it's now like tactic country or something,
Yes.
right? This is
Yeah.
basically that now. As in, I can kind of throw the opening out of the window a little bit, because now the king is on e7, everything changes. The bishop's disconnected from c5, the knight can't develop properly, the queen can't access h4, you obviously can't castle, and it's all pretty
Well,
bad.
that was a bad move. Okay.
Yeah. No, it,
Okay.
it was. It was.
Yeah. Okay.
um,
Yeah.
so now the dynamic of the game changes entirely, essentially, right? So I take on c5. I just told you several times that taking on c5 was a terrible move for white. Now I play it and
Yes.
it's one of the best moves. Why?
Well, now you just shut off another. Uh,
Okay, let me let me
Let me see.
let me rephrase this. So
Yeah.
when you played c5, taking is terrible because you'll simply take back and you'll develop very easily and have very nice control of the center, right?
Hmm.
You understand that, yeah?
I do. Yeah.
Yes, okay. So in this position, taking is actually very good for white. This is just taking a pawn. And this is different. Why?
Is it because you can push farther into black's territory?
I mean, c6 is well defended, right?
Okay.
So if, let's say, you played a nothing move and I played c6, black is actually almost equal here, even though your king is on e7 after knight c6. So I'd just be
Okay.
giving you the pawn back for nothing, really.
Okay.
The reason that now taking is good is because the king is blocking the bishop, right?
Uh huh.
So you can't actually win the pawn back. And that
Oh.
changes the dynamic entirely because one, it's just a free pawn, right? So being up a pawn
Right.
is obviously good. But two, losing my d4 pawn isn't so much an issue anymore because your bishop can't actually exploit the dark squares, right? Does that make
Oh.
sense?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have plenty of time to let's say you go after this pawn with a move like knight d7, right?
Right.
The computer wants f5. It's a very tactical line. Don't worry about it. Um, I can play a very simple bishop to e3 and just defend the pawn, and like you actually can't really get it back. I can play b4 to hold on to it if I want, and it just suffocates your position, really. And it's
Yeah.
just a free pawn.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
If you go back one move, one more. Yeah. So when you moved that, would it not be beneficial to go queen a5, check the king, and then take the bishop?
Well, that's exactly what you did in the game. Why? There's only one move for white here. This is a very common pattern that will be
Oh,
very useful to learn.
yeah. The bishop, bishop c3.
Knight, sorry, you mean knight c3?
That's what I meant. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no
Yeah.
worries, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a super common sort of idea. It's in many openings the bishop comes to b5 and this diagonal can be open for the queen to try to exploit, right? With a
Okay.
double attack. And in many, many openings, this knight comes to c3 to block the check and defend the bishop, right?
Okay.
So essentially, by playing queen a5, you're kind of letting me develop for free, if that
Oh.
makes sense.
Yep.
Because me developing a knight is arguably more important than you developing a queen. Because on one level, you've developed a piece, and then I've just developed a piece, so that's dead equal. That's just 1 for 1. But as you said with your opening principles earlier, normally it's the minor pieces first. And the reason, I mean, there's many reasons, but one of the reasons is that because the minor pieces are worth less than the queen, significantly less, they can kind of do the dirty work better than a queen can. Because if the queen gets attacked, she's got to run away, basically. Whereas if a minor piece gets attacked, if it's by another minor piece or a rook or a queen, it doesn't necessarily matter because they're worth the same or less. Whereas a queen is vulnerable to everything. You get what I mean?
Okay. I do. Yeah.
So it's just risky to put your queen in the middle of the board very early on because I can attack your queen while developing and gain something called an initiative.
Okay.
Does that make
I must not
sense?
have. Yeah, I think what happened in the game, I didn't see, just like I didn't this time. I did not see the knight move.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, you've got to learn this kind of thing, and one of the best ways to learn it is purely just pattern recognition, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the move looks dead obvious, but I've been playing chess for a long time, right? So
Sure.
a large part of it is literally just, yeah, I can always meet queen a5 with knight c3 to defend the bishop because I've seen it a billion times before. But okay, you played knight c6, which is a reasonable move, just developing the knight. Nothing wrong with that. Here I played a3. The computer doesn't love it, but it's still a okay move. What's the point of a3?
To keep my knight from coming into b4.
Partially, yeah. I suppose the knight and the bishop could gang up on the c2 pawn. Um, Let me think. How do I phrase this? So you know how we were previously just talking about how a queen can be vulnerable in the middle of the board early on in the game, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because it can be attacked by other things and my pieces can come forward with tempo, essentially, yeah?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what might the purpose of a3 be?
Maybe b4
Yeah,
follow
yeah.
up. Yeah.
And to be fair, actually, I don't think I can do it just yet. I don't know if you can take this, and after takes, you can win the rook. Although the computer finds some very funny checkmate lines after this. But yes, essentially that is the idea, to try and play b4 and kick the queen out. And also, while kicking the queen out, I defend my c5 pawn, right?
Yes. Right.
And I secure the extra pawn, and I can just keep playing. So here, king d7. I assume adding protection to the knight.
Um. I think like we were talking about before. A panic move. Yeah, I think that was
Right.
a panic move. Oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And panic as in there was literally no reason behind it, or panic as in, oh no, my knight's under attack.
I think it actually was more like, oh shoot, my knight's under attack. I need to get behind it to try to defend it a little.
Hmm.
And then I thought so that the let's see, Yeah, it and also my other reasoning was it opened up my dark square bishop.
Yeah, which is very reasonable. But it does justify my a3 move because I assume I play b4 here. Yeah, and then not only do I defend c5, but I'm doing it with tempo on the queen, which kind of shows in practice why bringing the queen out can be detrimental because I I kind of like nullify your move, your king d7 move, trying to take c5 with a tempo because the queen just happens to be there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, queen c7, perfectly reasonable. Here, the computer wants moves like f5 because either you win the bishop or something like takes, and I can take on d5. Kind of just saying the pawn is overworked. Have you heard that concept before?
I've heard the only thing that I've heard maybe near that is like removing the defender for a like tactical study, but
Yeah, no, that's very similar, if not the same concept, just said a different way. The point of the move f5, which I didn't play, but it's what the computer wants, is to say that, well, this pawn is not only defending d5, but also protecting the f5 square. But turns out both of them are actually really important squares. So one piece can't really be doing both of these jobs at once, right?
okay.
Um, so I ended up taking on d5 with the knight. I kind of was using the same idea where I wanted something like take and then f5, kind of removing the defender of the f5 square, right?
Okay.
You went queen to d8, so your queen is no longer under attack. And then, to be fair, I don't think we need to particularly run through the rest of the game. I think it'd probably be more beneficial for me to import one of your other games that I had a quick look at and see how you play against somebody your own rating. Because, in fairness, I'm like a 2000 odd rated player, so it's a little bit difficult, right?
Yeah.
So let's see this game. Let me load this in.
No, it's not a little difficult. It was impossible. It was really hard to think on every move. Yeah.
Yeah, which is to be expected. So, okay, can you see this game here, e4, e6?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so here you're playing against a French defense. Knight to f3, perfectly reasonable. d5 and d3. Is that something you've learned, or were you just defending your central pawn?
No, I was just defending the pawn.
But funnily enough, this is actually a line, I believe. Um, but yeah, it's perfectly reasonable. One of the things that you should consider is what happens if black actually just takes on e4.
Then I would take. I think whenever I've gone back through the computer, if I take the pawn, then they take the queen. I move the king over, and that's from what I was reading. It's not that bad of a position, but I may be wrong.
It's not that bad of a position. The reasoning is, I know some similar positions to this. The king can't castle, but the queens are off the board, so it's not a particularly big deal. And also you can play a move like I'm not sure where the king belongs here. It might be on c2. After the move c3, which is kind of a common idea. And you can play these positions and go into an endgame. Personally, I wouldn't recommend them. I think they're a bit boring, and you maybe learn more with queens on the board. But okay, your opponent went c6 anyway, so all that out the window. Um, you take. Why take? If you were going to take, why not do it immediately?
Um, I don't know. I think whenever. I can't speak to that, but I know that whenever he made that move, I saw the I saw him making his little pyramid, and I wanted to try. Uh, I wanted to try to knock that down, basically. So
Right.
if I could take, I kind of looked at it and went, okay, if I can take the d5 square down, even if he moves another one in, he may not move. It may not be the c pawn he moves toward the center. It may be the e pawn, and then now he's got a weakness on that side. I don't know. Just kind of thinking through it. I think this was a trigger finger move.
Okay. Okay. I would say a couple things here. Firstly, you do have the option of e5 and getting this kind of advanced Caro Kann structure, except the bishop is still locked behind the e pawn.
Okay.
So you could play a move like e5 here and justify it like that. You could also just not do anything in the center and just develop, because as we've already discussed, we're not losing any material. You've already seen this line in the previous position, and the only difference is that c6 and bishop f4 are on the board, added on, which, would you say that's better for white or better for black to have this position
I, I say better for
rather
white.
rather than this one?
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I would say this position here that you have now, that would be better because you've got two pieces developed and white has none. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, black has none.
I I know what you mean. Don't worry. And would you say, so obviously bishop f4 is a good inclusion. Would you say c6 is good or not,
um,
as opposed to the pawn being on c7?
I don't know.
Okay, well, there's a few things you could say. You could argue the pawn on c7 is weak to the bishop and would have to come to c6 anyway. But you could also argue that it takes away the natural developing square for the knight, right?
Okay.
However, it also stops bishop b5. So let's say the knight did go to c6, then bishop b5 would be pinning the knight, right?
Okay.
So, let's say back in this position, something like take, 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 knight c6, bishop b5, maybe this is good for white. I don't know.
Because of the pin.
Yeah. Although here, I mean, just bishop d7 and its pin is not very relevant, right?
Right.
But okay, okay. Semantics aside, you take, which I would say is not the best move, and perhaps you can understand the reasoning through after, let's say, well, either pawn actually. If e takes, then black gets to develop this bishop, whereas with the pawn on e6, the bishop is stuck. So you could argue that you're helping black to develop if he takes with the e pawn, right?
Right.
If black takes with the c pawn, then what you've essentially done is traded this pawn for this pawn. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I would argue the e4 pawn is much better than the c6 pawn. One, it's of course a central pawn. Two, it's controlling squares on the black side of the board, whereas this c6 pawn isn't particularly. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Sorry, I'm trying to take it kind of trying to let it like sink in.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, the e4 pawn is it's strong because just because it's controlling the d5 square. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. All
I'm
right.
saying that when you take here, your opponent takes back with the c pawn. Yeah, okay. And what that essentially does is gives black a bit of a monopoly over the light squares in the center. Can you aesthetically see that?
Yeah.
Whereas here, it looks a bit more even.
Okay.
It's like there's tension here between the light squares, whereas here, there's no tension, and black just has them. It's not a
Okay.
big deal, but it's just useful to be able to conceptualize that kind of thing, because central control especially as a beginner, is a very important thing.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I was just kind of going through it again. Like, I think I see what you're talking about.
I think how how can I explain this? Basically, E and D pawns are very valuable because they can control the center like immediately, right?
Yeah.
As you get further to the flanks, the pawns arguably get less valuable because they can't control central squares as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a massive deal, but kind of plays into black's hands. But anyway, knight e5 is an interesting move. What's the purpose of it?
So the purpose that I was thinking was, what was that for? I don't know.
Okay, that's all right.
Not really, not really sure what I was thinking on that one.
Well, the knight does exert control over some squares in the black position, right? Which could be useful.
Okay.
Um, moving the same piece twice in the opening like this is typically not a good idea because you kind of want to bring all the pieces into the party and then start advancing. But I think this kind of demonstrates. I think it demonstrates what I was talking about quite well because I would argue this 95 move makes way more sense if we have the same position except d4 has been played rather than d3, right?
Okay.
So here after the move, let me
Oh
find
yeah,
it.
yeah.
After the move
No,
knight
I got you.
e5, the pawn is just on d4 instead, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So exerting more central control, right?
Sure.
Then a move like knight e5, I would say, while still not amazing, is better because by having this d pawn advanced up the board, you're exerting control in the black position, and alongside the knight, it's actually a fairly stable piece. It can't easily be batted away with a move like bishop d6 because it's already defended, right?
Right.
Um, Whereas in the game, when you play knight to e5, this knight's completely undefended.
I, Alex, not to interrupt you, I do remember why I did this.
Okay, go for it.
Uh, yeah. So there's a tactic that is probably like my favorite one, um, where he would follow up with f6 and then queen h5
Yeah.
and uh, pawn g6. Yep, and then knight takes, and then you get the rook. I think that was
Yes.
my. I think that was my reasoning for that because a lot of like,
Yeah,
even though
yeah,
I know I'm low player, just playing lower level players all the time, they fall for it all the time. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. And I mean, it's a relatively intricate tactic, you know. Like it's not immediately obvious. It's a few moves deep, right? So it's less likely that someone
Sure.
will spot it. Um, I would say try try to avoid doing things like that and like looking for what I would call like cheap tactics because
Yeah.
if your opponent just doesn't fall for that and doesn't play f6, I mean here he goes bishop d6 and it's like yeah, actually why is your knight here anymore, right? I mean
Okay.
the computer, its second favorite move, believe it or not, is literally just to retreat the knight. It thinks it's that bad
Oh,
on the 5 square.
wow. Okay.
It's not its favorite move, but it's its second favorite move. The other move is pawn d4, which is what I was saying before, where the knight is much better on e5 if it is supported by a pawn, because then your idea of f6 being met with queen to h5 makes way more sense, because if takes, then you'll just take, right? And that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas, and then black might think, well, the only way to get rid of the knight, I must have to use the pawn, and then you can hit him with the tactic, and then you
Okay.
can go and win your rook. So I would say that's a bit more of a robust way to go about it. Bishop f4 is a reasonable move on the surface, just defending the knight. How might black get a winning position here? Try and find the problem with bishop to f4.
Oh, so queen f6 would be forking both of them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just not really a good way to deal with this, right?
Right.
So your opponent did, luckily for you, play the move f6, and this is part of the reason that I wanted to look at this game. I wanted to see how you dealt with getting yourself into a very nice position. So, of course, we saw in our game you didn't have a particularly good position, which is understandable. But here, you get yourself into a winning position. After pawn g6, knight g6, what happens if bishop takes f4?
You just get the bishop, and then you got a discover check.
You could do that. What else could you do?
You could take the rook
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, you could do either. And to be honest, whichever one you fancy is fine, because here you win the bishop back, you're up a pawn, the king's going to have to move. That's great. Here you win yourself a rook, but your knight's a little bit trapped, and maybe this bishop's quite a good piece. So that's up to you. You can kind of choose there.
Yeah, it actually looks like that's not too far from being mate at that point.
In this position.
Yes.
Well, if the king goes like this, then absolutely. But the king could run to the queen side and get away from the knight. Something like this. Don't get me wrong, it's still completely winning, but...
So let's see, man. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, yeah, back to the game. So g6, you take, your opponent takes, and here you have two choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you either take the rook or you take the pawn. Which do you think is better?
You know, at that point, I remember this game in this specific position, and I did not know which one to take.
Yeah, it can be hard to decide.
I really don't remember. What did I play?
So, you, I believe, took the pawn.
I did. Yeah. Okay. That's what I was thinking.
And taking the pawn looks good, because of course you're delivering a check and you're winning a pawn. But remember, you have sacrificed a knight for this. So on surface level, you've sacrificed a knight. So let's go back. You sacrificed a knight for 2 pawns, right?
Okay.
Which is typically a bad trade, because a pawn is worth 1 point and a knight is worth 3 points, right?
Okay.
Here, do you have a mate?
No.
Why?
Well, if the king, I mean, so there's a couple things, right? So if you go, if he were to go king f8,
Mm-hmm.
then he stops anything I could potentially do. If he goes king d7, he
Mm-hmm.
could just escape out the little window there.
Yeah.
I would still win the rook, but
Would you?
it's kind of. I mean, I think I would.
There is one move here for black that saves the rook.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, so knight blocking it. Yeah. So e7.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
black survives. And
Okay.
then, I mean, you could nab a third pawn, and you have 3 pawns for the knight, and you could make a game of it. But I would say because you're so far behind in development that black probably has the advantage here.
Yeah, for sure.
What I would say on a conceptual level, the reason you're not checkmating black is because these bishops are going to get traded, right? That's basically inevitable. Other than that, you only have one attacker. Now, in fairness, a move like king e7 would be winning, because then you do win the rook, because the knight can't block, right?
Yeah.
So that would justify the position a bit more. But if we're purely talking about delivering checkmate, you've only got one attacker. The queen can't do it on her own, right?
Right.
And also, there's kind of like a... When I attack, like when I launch attacks, one of the things that I check for is purely on a numeric basis, do I have more attackers than my opponent has defenders, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
Because typically, let's say you have 4 attackers and your opponent has 1 defender, there's a good chance you might be able to sacrifice 2 of those pieces for your opponent's only defender, and then deliver mate with the remaining 2 pieces, or something like that. You just literally have more firepower than your opponent, right?
Gotcha.
Here, however, I'd argue black has 4 main defenders, and you have 2 attackers. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah,
So,
it was kind of scary being in being in that territory with like a single piece that's so valuable.
yeah,
And I see where I went wrong now, taking the pawn instead.
yeah. So, better just nab the rook. I mean,
Gotcha.
bishop f4 isn't all that scary. Why?
I
Because
think maybe
here,
that's why I took the pawn instead. That was my reasoning, is because I didn't want to lose my bishop.
yeah, yeah. And of course, you can't take this because you'll just lose your queen, right?
Right. Yeah. That was my reasoning. Now that I saw it.
But don't stop calculating, because after bishop takes bishop, you can just take the knight,
Mm,
and
gotcha.
the entire black king side falls apart. And here, like I was saying with the whole numeric thing before, you could very easily argue that black actually only has 1 defender after his king moves, and it's 1 versus 1.
Oh, and then I could just nab the queen, and then
Yeah, you could
I
nab
would
the
be.
queen and just trade off, yeah, and then if you count the material, you're up like an exchange and a pawn,
Yeah.
which is pretty winning. Pretty winning. But okay. Queen g6. The game is not over. King d7. And you go bishop d6, which is good. The bishops are going to get traded, so you might as well lure the king out while you're at it. So king takes, queen g7, which puts pressure on the rook, of course. Rook h5 is an interesting move. Okay. What do you think might be better for black here? Now, let me preface this, actually. The reason I don't like rook h5 is, to me, the rook just looks vulnerable. Kind of like when your queen came to a5 in our game. The queen was a vulnerable piece, right?
Right.
This rook, similarly, it's not quite as valuable as a queen, but it's still more valuable than a bishop, let's say. So,
Yeah.
I mean, bishop e2 here doesn't actually work because of rook g5. But if rook g5 didn't exist, the black rook would just have to move, and it's actually quite uncomfortable because you're just developing with tempo, right?
Yeah, he's undefended. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the reason I don't like the look of the move rook h5. So what might you prefer to play with black here? Because of course the rook is under attack.
Honestly, I mean, like, I think knight e7 is not a bad move.
I agree. Why?
In that position, because if you do that, you're losing a pawn, right, versus a rook.
Mm-hmm. Can you, using the same concept, play an even stronger move? As in opening up the queen's defense of the rook?
Mm-hmm. Maybe, gosh, maybe even knight g6.
Knight h6, right?
That's what I meant. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
knight h6.
Yeah. And I mean, this way, the queen defends the pawn, the queen defends the rook defends the knight. And although this looks very flimsy, can you understand why this is, a little bit flimsy looking, right?
Yeah, it does work.
But it doesn't matter because there's only one attacker.
Yeah.
So, like, it's going to be ages till a second attacker can even join the party for white, right?
Right.
Most of the time, when you're attacking with a queen, you want to partner her with other pieces to help her out because she can't do everything on her own because she's so valuable. She kind of needs pawns or pieces to lead the way a lot of the time, and then she can enter into the attack once things have been softened up a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that might help with conceptualizing it. But okay, queen g7, rook h5, queen g3 check. I assume just getting the queen out of the position with tempo.
Yeah, just pulling her back to just keep her safe, and then to get out, just to get out of the seventh rank there without a defender is, that's not a good place for her.
Yeah, totally agreed. So king e7, and you go queen g6. If you were going to go to g6, why not do it immediately?
Well, that's a good question.
I think one of the things you need to be aware of is, like I kind of just said, the queen is the strongest piece, which is a massive strength, but also a massive weakness in some senses, because the queen is incredibly powerful, but she's also incredibly vulnerable. By moving so many times with the queen, like, your opponent, if he was playing this better, would be able to develop his pieces while attacking your queen very nicely, right? So after queen
Okay.
g6, your opponent went rook f5, but like rook g5 is much better. You attack the queen, you save the rook, you're hitting this weak pawn, so your rook kind of maneuvers itself to a very good square with tempo, right? So your
Okay.
queen is just like moving here and there and everywhere, while your opponent's pieces are improving incrementally, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But okay. Queen g6, rook.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, say what you're gonna say.
So I think maybe I play off of it's kind of a bad habit. I see that, like, I know the weaknesses of players my level, and I guess I don't know the weaknesses like I would if I were a 1500, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I noticed patterns, like, for example, he went rook, what was it, h4, I think, earlier, or something like that. He didn't even think of
h5.
the move. Yeah, rook h5. Yeah, that's it. He didn't even think about that move. He just wanted to get his rook away. So he knew that if he went to h4, I would push a pawn, then he'd have to push it back, and he'd run out of room. Like, I know how that type of person thinks, I guess, that rating of a player. So I get in trouble because sometimes I play people and I'm like, whoa, he's definitely not like he's not an idiot, more or
Okay,
less.
okay. Let me teach
Yeah,
you a very important concept. Ready?
yeah,
So, when you want to play a move, in this case, let's say Queen G6, this is called a candidate move, right? So here, there's many different moves you can play. You could play Bishop E2, hitting the rook. You could play Knight C3, just developing a knight. Or you could play Queen G6, hitting the rook. Let's say those were the three moves you were contemplating, which we would refer to as candidate moves, right?
okay,
All of them achieve a purpose. Queen G6 attacks the rook. Bishop E2 attacks the rook. Knight C3 develops a piece, right?
right,
Now, what we want to do is we don't want to see a move, see, oh, it hits the rook. If my opponent doesn't defend the rook, then I win a rook, and then play it. That's not what we want to do. We want to see the move, go, okay, this move attacks my opponent's rook. If he doesn't do anything, I'll win the rook. But we don't want to look for what happens if your opponent does, like, blunders. We want to think, we want to kind of prove the move wrong. We want to prove it wrong. And then if you can't prove it wrong, then you should play it. So, for example, one of the moves I really want to play in this position, personally, is Bishop E2. I really want to play it. But I wouldn't play this in a game, because although I would love to play that move and say, well, if the rook retreats, then I just develop my bishop for free, I have to reject it because rook G5 and the queen is under attack, and my bishop abandons the pawn on G2, making my position very weak. So my Bishop E2 candidate move, I have to throw out because I prove that it's wrong because I see Rook G5 and I go, okay, can't play that anymore. Now I've got to look for something else. In the same
okay,
vein, you see Queen G6. You're like, I really want to play that move. It hits the rook. And if black does something wrong, he's going to lose a piece somehow, right?
right,
But you have to prove it wrong. You have to go, well, actually, Rook G5 and my queen's under attack. And I'm just helping black. So you have to discard that move and go, okay, Bishop E2 doesn't work. Queen G6 doesn't work. What next? And then maybe you play a move like Knight C3 because you go, well, there's no reason not to play that. If Rook G5, he still hits the queen, but now G2 is defended. So, I don't know, I can move my queen, this is defended, and it's not so bad. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, whenever you have a position, if, like, the first move that comes to your mind, it will come to your mind for a reason, obviously. Like Queen G6 here, you played because you wanted to win the rook. But try and find a reason not to play it. If you can't find a reason not to play it, then play it.
Oh,
Cool?
okay, yeah, yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, I mean
Awesome.
that's kind of simple to think about, but it's still true.
Well, yeah, but it's also, like, once you hear it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's obvious. But when you played Queen G6, for example, you were just thinking, well, my opponent might fall for something.
Yeah,
You need to be more concrete, in the sense of, like, you want the reasoning behind your moves, you want to be sturdy and strong and not a flimsy, oh, they might fall for this. The same with Knight
gotcha.
E5, basically, earlier in the game, if you remember that.
Okay,
So, like, when you played Knight E5 here, your reasoning was, well, if they do this, then I have Queen to H5. And that's true. That's true. And if G6, you can take. But what if they just don't? You have to prove it wrong. You have to go, well, okay, but if black just does nothing, then this does nothing.
okay, okay. I got you. Yeah, I'll definitely put that into work.
So try and see how that works for you. It is more likely that you'll find better moves with that mindset. But okay. Your opponent goes Rook F5. G4 is reasonable, but again, rook G5 is the issue.
Ah, okay. I didn't see it.
Well, luckily, neither did your opponent, because he gave a check instead. Bishop E2, good move. I like that. Knight D7. Again, the computer really wants this move, but Knight D7. Yeah, I like that move. D4 makes a lot of sense. Taking space, hitting the rook. Rook G5. Very tricky. I like this move. This is a very tricky move. Because I suppose King E8 is... I mean, the computer says it's completely winning after H4 because the rook is technically trapped. I don't expect you to see that. Relatively advanced concept. But it asks a question, and there's no immediate drawback. So I like that. Like, again, if I was trying to prove this move wrong, I could say, well, King F8 and black isn't losing anything, but you were also under attack anyway. Like, your queen had to go somewhere, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I like that move. I can't, like, if I have this position, I probably would play the same move because, yeah, I can't prove that move wrong. And we are asking questions. We're hitting a few different things in the position, right? That can't be a bad thing.
Sure.
So, King D6, a very strange square. H4, I love that. Great idea. Again, this is a good example of why rooks can be quite vulnerable if they're out in the open too early on in the game, because, I mean, the rook, it's a very valuable piece, and it's surrounded by non-valuable pieces, right?
Right.
Whereas, I mean, if it was a pawn, for example, if it was a pawn here instead, it wouldn't matter because pawns are worthless. You can just, okay, not worthless, but a pawn's worth the same as a pawn. You could just take. Whereas here, the rook is incredibly vulnerable. Your opponent, okay. Yep,
Okay.
queen trade is great. Awesome. Love that. And then takes. Yep. I like that check. I assume you're just... Well, okay. You're delivering a check, but why is this move more than just a check? Why do I like it so much?
Well, my reasoning for doing that, if you go back, let's see, 2 moves, I think. Yeah, so my reasoning for taking the queen, I do remember this part, was I wanted to put that rook on the 7th rank somehow.
Yeah. I mean, rooks on the
Yeah.
7th rank, they're very powerful. They're
And
very powerful.
I knew that if he moved, I've got pretty nasty control over that 7th rank now.
Yep.
No matter where he did move, right? So he could have moved anywhere. I assumed he'd probably go like King D6.
Yeah, I would say King D6 is probably the move I would play, but I mean, there's no good option. Although, maybe this just gives up a fork, but I mean, it's pretty bad regardless. But okay, King F8, Bishop B5. I don't mind Bishop B5, but I would say it's more important... Okay. In this position, what's the material count? Like, why is this so good for you?
You mean just purely out of the material count?
Yep.
Let's see. 5, 3, 3. It's, so I'm what, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I mean, it's 22 to what? 5 and 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I'm up 4 points.
I'd say a better way of evaluating this kind of thing is go, firstly, let's count the pawns. Okay, black's got 5 pawns, white's got 6 pawns, so you're up 1 point of material. Then we can match up the pieces. So these are worth the same, these are worth the same, these are worth the same, these are not worth the same. So you're up 1 pawn, which is 1 point, and then an exchange, which is 2 points. So 3 in total.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I told you overthinking.
It's just a slightly easier way of conceptualizing it. I used to do the exact same thing, so don't worry. So what I would say here is you're up an exchange and a pawn, but more importantly, up an exchange. But you're only playing with one piece right now, and I know you're trying to play bishop b5 to threaten the knight and play with the bishop as well, which is reasonable. But I'd say it's more important to get your other pieces out quickly. So something like
Yeah,
knight to c3, queenside
absolutely.
castle, get the rook over, like play with all the pieces and make your advantage felt, right?
Sure.
But okay, there's nothing wrong with bishop b5 though. Knight f6, of course, hitting the rook. It's an alright move, yeah. If king g7, what's the plan?
Just retreat it.
Just retreat, okay. I would say when you have a rook on the 7th rank like this, if you can keep it on the 7th rank, it's probably a good idea to. How can you do that?
Oh, I guess safely I could have gone to c7.
Hmm. And can black really kick you out?
No, because if he goes knight e8, then I'll just take it.
Yeah. And then you've got this beautiful rook on the 7th rank, and there's basically nothing black can do to get rid of it. I
No,
mean, after a move like knight c3, for example, just developing, if king d8, what are you doing?
just move it to the other side.
Yeah, just swing it over. I mean, even if this fork didn't exist, like, just rook here, and the rook is on the 7th rank, and there's nothing black can do. Right?
Right.
But okay, there's nothing wrong with this necessarily. A6. Yep, love that square. Why did you choose that square?
I saw it gave me the most space, like, to control.
Yep, perfect. Perfect.
And also, if I didn't expect him to move to what? He took the pawn on g4, right? Is that the next
yeah.
move? Yeah. I expected him actually to do something more like knight to e4, because I've seen it a lot. I don't know why, but I've seen it where people do that, and I'm not sure what they're actually doing. But when you take, I guess it's because they think that they've got a pawn more forward now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not that hard to stop, right? So
Nope. I
I
mean,
think my understanding.
yeah, the pawn is just dropping immediately. I mean, you could go, well, you can't go knight f6. You could do king g7 and then knight f6, but this pawn is still very vulnerable, right?
For sure, yeah. I
So,
think that was my thing as to why I moved. Uh, that was the other reason that I moved there.
I would say also that this diagonal, like out of all the diagonals you could choose, realistically, there's these three, right?
Right.
I think it's obvious that this is the most active diagonal that you could choose, right?
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay, bishop d3, love that. Knight g4. Bishop h7. Okay, that's a... See, I saw this initially. I saw this maneuver, and I rejected it, but just as I was thinking about the position, because I saw knight back to f6, and I was like, well, I'm just going to have to trade off. Do I really want to do that? Not really, because I actually quite like my bishop.
Okay.
So when I personally think about this position, I go, to be honest, this is a very powerful bishop, and I'd like to keep it alive if possible. So to me, I mean the computer wants rook h5 just to win the g5 pawn. But I don't know, even a move like king to d2, I like the look of. Just preparing knight d2 and bringing this rook over.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Which, I mean, to be fair, if you're concerned about the king, it might just be easier to play knight d2 and castle queenside, which there is absolutely nothing wrong with. But okay, bishop h7, king g7, you take, very good. Rook g5, perfect. Knight h6, knight c3, very nice. Yeah, I mean,
I
I'd
don't
say
think that a purely. Sorry, go ahead.
it's a little bit of a meaningless check, is all I'll say.
Well, I didn't actually I wasn't doing that out of purely the reason for a check on that move.
Well,
It
I
just
assume it's
happened.
to get the rook out of danger, right?
Yeah, so all I was doing was getting the rook out of danger, and it happened to coincide with checking the king at that point.
But it doesn't actually get the rook out of danger because king g6.
Okay, I got you.
And the rook still has to move a second time. So, I don't know, it's probably easier just to stay away from the king and bring the rook back.
Okay.
And I mean, you could see how a checkmate could form as well here. How might a checkmate form? Pattern recognition.
Yeah, it's you get the king out of the way, and you could very easily ladder mate somebody. I mean,
Yeah. Whereas, I mean, arguably after this sequence, the king is much safer in the center because it can't get ladder mated anymore. Whereas
right?
after a move
Yeah,
like rook g2, the king is pinned to this h file, right?
right.
I mean, black can defend with a move like knight h6, but still very uncomfortable. To be honest, I think the rook might just be sorry, the knight might just be lost in some lines, but anyway. King g6, rook back. Yep. Queenside castle, lovely. Check. Yeah, very good. f4. I really like that move f4, by the way. That's really nice.
I was trying to cut off any, like what I was doing was again that pattern recognition, like you were talking about, and I was trying to basically just cut off some squares. So I knew that if I did that move, then e5 and g5 are kaputs, right? They're it's no more. So now you're limiting even more options for him.
And why is controlling e5 so significant?
I don't know.
So when I see this position, I'm like, okay, the white rooks are very good. In this position, however, I'm a little bit concerned about the move e5 because it gets this bishop into the game, right?
Yeah, sure.
After f4, e5 is just a free pawn, and then you get a passed pawn. I mean, I don't know how much longer black can survive this. So e5 can't be played, which means this bishop can't gain access to this diagonal,
Okay.
and it's just completely trapped behind its own pawns.
Well, to be fair, I did not see any of that, so I can't take credit.
But that's why I love f4 so much. You are absolutely keeping this knight under control. That is very true. But to me, the biggest thing is that because the pawn can't move, this bishop can't do anything. And also, this rook can't really do anything because it's trying to get on the e file, but you're stopping it entirely now, right?
Right.
So this is known as like a bind, where normally you use pawns to control the movement of another pawn and essentially dominate central space by doing that. For example, there's an opening in the Sicilian called the Maroczy bind, where if I remember correctly, oh, what is it? It's like knight here, d4, take. Yes, and it's after I believe the move d6 and then c4. This is known as the Maroczy bind, if I'm correct. And you can see the similarities between the pawns, right?
Okay.
So from this position to Let me find it. This position. Can you see how that's similar?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the reason the Maroxy bind is quite a good opening is because it makes it so hard for black to play the move d5 in the future. And if black plays a
Gotcha.
move like e5, it's really hard for black to play this position because he's never ever pushing d5. And then this bishop can't get out because it's stuck.
Okay.
So it's that exact same concept, but in a completely different scenario.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So that's why I love this move so much, and why it's a great move. So, okay, king up, check. Interesting. So you bait the king in? Yes, there we
Yeah.
go. Whoa,
I,
okay.
that was gonna tell you that was a stupid move. The next one. I
Yeah,
don't know
so what might be better here for white?
definitely not what I did.
But if you could do it again, what would you do?
Well, let's see. I would probably would move the rook to h7.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And black just can't defend everything, right?
No, and then he's messed up at that point. Yeah.
And it's, I mean, the knight moves, you take the bishop, you're up a whole rook. This is very, very hard for black to play. So, okay, rook f to h1. b5, okay. Knight e2. Are you concerned about the move b4 here?
No.
No. So,
No, I just moved the rook. I mean the knight because I wanted to take away the. I think let's see. I think maybe at this point I was running out of time and I was having I had less time to think about what I was supposed to be doing. I'm not sure. Maybe so,
okay.
but my reasoning was to cut off the G3 and F4 squares.
Are you trying to deliver checkmate here?
Yes.
Okay, don't.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to that point. Yes.
Don't.
Okay.
Even if you can manufacture a checkmate, you don't need to because you're already up an exchange, right?
Okay.
The king, it's out in the open, so on one level, it's very vulnerable. But on another level, it has 8 different squares to choose from every single move. So covering all 8 of those squares is tricky,
Okay.
right? So to me, I would say forget about the king and go after these terrible pieces.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
So with that in mind, what might be a stronger move here?
Yeah. Rook H7 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so easy now. I mean, I
You're
don't
winning.
know how
You're
black
on
defends.
Yeah.
Like, if rook f8, then, I mean, the computer comes up with some interesting suggestions, but what would you play here?
Uh, probably. Probably would move to Rook G7.
And then, if the
That
king
puts
moves?
the king. Yeah, and then now I've got both rooks on the seventh rank. I can do.
Yeah, you can do that. And that is completely reasonable. Bishop e8. And I suppose you're freezing black's pieces. You could also consider rook to f1 check.
Okay.
Why might this be
Uh,
better?
is sneaky. Oh yeah, I see it. Okay. Yeah, because then you win everything, and you're still up. Okay.
Yeah, so the king moves and you take, and
Takes, and then takes the bishop. Yeah.
yeah, and the bishop can try and survive, but I mean, it has no movement anyway because all the pawns are in the way. So
Yeah.
So, okay. Knight e2 is not a terrible move, but don't look for mate in this position. As we just demonstrated in this line with rook f1 check, the king's vulnerability can be used against it, not necessarily to checkmate the king, but to win material, right?
Right.
We don't need to checkmate the king here. It's very difficult. I mean, like, the best move here is king d2, trying to take away e3, and then go for mate in 18 moves, according to the engine. You don't
I'd
need to
never.
find that, though. I wouldn't find that, either, because I'm not looking for mate. Like, just go for the pieces, right? These are
Right.
so weak and vulnerable. They're just tripping over each other, really. So,
So, one
yeah, go on.
question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you sometimes you have to win by attrition? I mean, is that the deal?
I'd say that's the easier thing to do in a lot of cases. If you're up
Okay.
material, particularly. I
Okay.
mean,
I mean,
okay, let's put it this way. If you have a king and 2 pawns, okay, would you rather play a position where you have a king and 2 pawns and your opponent has a king, or would you rather play a position where you have a completely new game except your opponent has one less bishop? Which would you rather? So you have a
I
game where
probably,
you have a king and two
I'd probably,
pawns versus a king,
yeah,
or a completely new game except your opponent's down a bishop.
yeah, probably the new game. That would be my thought because the 2 pawns, depending on how they're set up, I mean, sometimes there's no draw.
But no. I mean, like, you have the king and 2 pawns versus a king.
Oh, other way. Um, I mean, I probably would choose the king and 2 pawns
Why?
because when I practice end games and stuff, like king and pawn versus king, you can draw that if you know what you're doing. You can force it where it's not a draw. I think being able to do it, I could win a queen out of it with the 2 pawns.
Yeah. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is it's far easier to win a game of chess with fewer pieces, even if you're up a smaller amount of material, than with loads of pieces, even if you're up more material.
Oh,
Typically,
gotcha.
that's
Sure.
that's what I'm getting at. So here I'm basically saying, yes, you are up in exchange, and you could go for mate, and the computer will find a way to checkmate here, but you're not a computer, and I would say it's far easier to just take it to an end game where it's like, let's say we get these pieces off the board. No, sorry. Let's say it's like a knight versus a rook or something. So we trade the
Hmm.
rooks, trade the knight for the bishop. I would say the rook versus the knight is way easier than like 2 rooks and a knight versus a knight, rook, and bishop. There's just less complication, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, okay. b5. Knight to e2. King f3, king d2. Good move. And now, okay, there's various mates. King f3. Nice. Little bit of repetition.
Yeah, I
um,
told you I'm out of time at this point. I
yeah,
couldn't.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So I'll let you off the hook. Bunch
Yeah.
of checks. Another check. Okay. That is a very nice tactic. Yeah, that's really good, that. Fair play.
Yeah, I saw that at the last minute.
That's good. Okay, here you've got knight g6, but it's all winning. But yeah, I assume you're low on time. Yeah, that's very good. That's quite an advanced tactic for a 500. Fair play. Um. Oh, and
See, that's my
I assume your opponent beat you on time here.
yeah, yeah. So That's my problem, man. I'm anywhere from like I'm anywhere from like 16 or 1700 to 2000 in puzzles, right? Rated. I play
Mm,
puzzles all the time, and I love them.
yeah.
But games are not puzzles, you know. And like,
Yes.
I feel like if I could get the opening tactic, the opening lines, I could probably keep the pressure up
Mm.
and then utilize the tactics. But I'm learning like tactics in and of themselves. Once you get past like 300 or 400, it doesn't matter as much anymore. At least not now. Like maybe a couple of years ago it did, but not now.
Yeah, because realistically, you have to manufacture good positions to make tactics work. I mean,
Yes.
here with your Rook F7 tactic, the position's still completely winning without it. Your position is so good that the tactics flow from the position, right?
Yeah.
Um, Typically, if your pieces are better placed and maybe you have more material, then the tactics are just more likely to work out in your favor, which here they did. So yeah, no, very interesting game. Um, I think that what I think that you should work on a bit is every move you play, I want there to be a justification, right? Don't play a move for the sake of playing a move. Even if you play a move and you have a reason for it, and it turns out to be wrong after further analysis, that's fine, right? That's just chess. Nobody is perfect. But you've got to have a reason for it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Also, try doing what I was saying with the candidate moves, right? So let's go back to this position I was looking at rather deeply with Queen G6. Here, like I said, these were the three candidate moves I was looking at here. I mean, the computer wants Queen G7, which of course you can also consider to be a candidate move. Firstly, don't play no increment chess if you want to improve. Play with increment, so probably 15 plus 10 rather than 10 plus 0.
Oh, all right.
It's way easier, trust. It's way easier to improve. Um, so yeah, I want you to find a few moves that you like the look of, try and prove them wrong, and if you can't prove the move wrong, then you play it.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Any questions? Just at all?
Um, no, that's pretty much the main thing, to just prove the move wrong? Is that what you want me to do?
As the main lesson I want you to take away, yeah, and try and implement in your games.
Yeah, I can do that. And then I'll start playing 15-10.
Yeah, because 15-10, you can never really run out of time, which means that you can afford to spend more time on each move, right?
Okay.
Because 10 seconds, if you get to an end game, 10 seconds a move should be enough, Like, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And it kind of just
I
gives
got
you better, like a better platform to spend maybe 5 minutes on one really crucial move, for example. Whereas in a 10-minute plus 0 increment game, you cannot spend 5 minutes on a move.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I play like at our local library.
Uh huh.
I don't teach kids like tactics and stuff like that. Obviously, I just teach them how the pieces move, and like this is how you want to kind of play. Just basic little things.
Hmm.
Have some pretty strong guys there. We've got guy that's like he's like 16 or 1700 feet A.
Hmm.
So he's pretty strong.
Hmm.
And the longer the time control is, like if we play a true 90-minute game or 60-minute game, um, it's funny, like online chess, I'm not that great at, but over the board chess, I give him a run for his money every time we play. And I don't know why that is. And so I'm trying to, obviously, like live play is not always available, right? Because it's the people just around where I live, they just don't play.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
like to play and I want to get better at online. However, I got to do that. So if that's what I need to do, then yeah, absolutely.
When you play against this guy, do you write down your moves to save the games?
No, I take, well, I guess kind of in a way, I take pictures of the moves. You know, like if we get in a good position, I'll go back and study it. Like, whoa, I got one good move here. Would I have made it? You know.
Okay, so what I also want you to do is play that guy if and when you can, or just anyone else in person in a really long time format, right? But I
Okay.
want you to write down all the moves, okay?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Because those will be a much better representation of you playing chess at your best, and we'll be able to get some really good insights from that.
Okay, yeah, perfect. He's also blind, so he's really really good, man.
He's like 1700 blind.
Yes, he is totally blind. He
Wow.
can see kind of like shadows, but that's pretty much it. He has a special board built out of like plyboard, and he's got grip tape for the black squares, and then he's got like the smooth of the plywood for the white squares, and then he has like the pieces have like little bits of cork on the bottom of them, and then each square has like a little round hole cut out so the pieces can sit
Mm.
perfectly in the. It's really really cool how he plays, man. He's very very good.
Yeah, it sounds it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do hope this was valuable for you, mate. Um,
Yeah. Well,
and I hope
it
it
was.
wasn't
Thanks.
too boring.
Yeah. No. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. I'll probably upload this as like a members only video or something if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will also send you a link to this recording if you want to go back and look at anything. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Cool. Well, this was great, and good luck, man. Send me an email or a text or something if you got any other questions.
Sure will. Thanks, Alex.
All right. See you, Chris.
Bye.